Hey guys, tonight we are going to step into a world that feels both familiar and deeply strange. A world without electricity, without plastic, without the constant noise of traffic. But it's also a world with a very different set of rules and written laws that govern the relationship between humans and the world around them. And if you break one of these laws, well, let's just say you might have a harder time than you'd think. Forgetting to say please and thank you is one thing, but forgetting to share your family's biggest secrets with a bunch of insects, that could be a fatal mistake. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps me know you're out there, listening in the quiet hours. Go ahead and drop a comment below with your city and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is small, and that's not a criticism, it's a comfort. It's defined by the stone wall at the edge of the far pasture, the dark line of the woods beyond that, and the dirt path that winds its way to the village, a place you visit maybe once a week. Your home is a cozy clutter of wood, thatch and plaster, smelling perpetually of wood smoke, baking bread, and the damp sweetness of the earth after a rain. Your days are measured not by a clock on the wall, there isn't one, but by the scent of the sun and the needs of the seasons. You wake when the rooster, that most obnoxious of alarm clocks, decides the day has begun, and you sleep when the fire in the hearth burns down to glowing embers. Life is a rhythm of chores. Fetching water from the well, its cold stone slick with moss. Mending clothes with thread that's thicker and rougher than anything you could imagine today. Turning the soil in the kitchen garden, feeling the cool, crumbly dirt under your fingernails. It's a simple life, a predictable one. But through it all, from the moment you wake to the moment you drift off to sleep, there is one constant, gentle, living sound. It's the soundtrack to your entire existence. It's the hum. Just beyond the kitchen door, near the south-facing wall where the sun is warmest, sit 5 woven straw domes. They look like giant, upturned baskets, each with a small, dark opening near the bottom. These are the SKEPS, the homes of your family's bees. And from these 5 unassuming structures emanates a low, resonant vibration that blankets the entire homestead. It's not a loud noise, not an annoying buzz. It's a deep, collective hum. A sound so constant you often forget it's there, but you do feel its absence in your very bones. It's the sound of productivity, of life, of 1,000 tiny hearts beating and 1,000 tiny wings vibrating in unison. It's the sound of honey being made. Honey, in your world, is gold. It's the only sweetness you know, besides the fleeting joy of a summer berry. It's stirred into medicine to soothe the cough. It's used to preserve fruits for the long winter, and it's fermented into the golden, celebratory drink of mead. A good honey harvest means comfort and a little bit of wealth. It means having something valuable to trade for salt, or iron, or a rare piece of colored cloth. So, the bees are important. But your family's relationship with them runs deeper than that. They aren't just livestock. Your mother calls them the little people or the good folk. You're taught never to shout near the hives, never to run past them, and never, ever to harm one. It's a respect that borders on reverence. You sometimes wonder why. Is it just because they sting, or is it something more? Historians and folk respect for bees springs from ancient Celtic beliefs about them being messengers from the other world, or if it was simply a practical, hard-won understanding that a happy, calm hive is a productive one. To you, it doesn't matter. It's just the way things are. The bees are part of the fabric of your home. It's the background noise to your earliest memories of chasing butterflies in the garden, of your father's laughter, of your grandmother humming a tune as she shelled peas on the doorstep. The hum is home. It is the gentle, steady breathing of your small world, a sign that everything is in its right place, that the seasons are turning as they should, and that all is well. Your grandfather is a man of few words and many routines. His back is bent into a permanent question mark from a lifetime of tending the fields, and his hands, though gnarled and weathered, are surprisingly gentle. H.E.S. the one who cares for the bees. It's his domain, his special responsibility. Most of his time with them is practical. He knows just when to add a new layer to the SKEP, just how much smoke from a smoldering rag will calm them without causing alarm, and just when the hives are heavy with honey, ready for the careful, patient harvest. You've watched him do this 100 times, his movements slow and deliberate, a silent dance between man and insect. But there's another part of his routine, something you only see when you're quiet and watchful. It's a part that has nothing to do with smoke or harvesting. You'll see him in the early morning, just as the mist is burning off the grass, standing before the 5 straw domes. He won't have his tools with him. He'll just be standing there, his hat in his hands, his head bowed slightly. His voice is too low for you to make out the exact words from a distance. It's more of a murmur, a soft, rhythmic rumble, almost like a prayer or a quiet song. He leans in close to the little dark opening of each hive, one by one, and speaks. His posture is one of deep respect, as if he were addressing a person of great importance. You've seen him do this when your cousin announced her betrothal. He went straight to the hives, and you saw his lips moving, sharing the good news. You saw him do it again when the new calf was born, a healthy little bull. A few quiet words for each hive. He shares the small triumphs and the gentle shifts in the family's life. To you, as a child, it's just one of grandfather's quirks. It's like the way he always taps the doorframe 3 times before entering the house, or how he refuses to kill a spider that spun its web indoors. It's part of the tapestry of who he is. It feels ancient and comforting, a piece of the world's quiet magic. You don't question it, you simply accept it. It's what he does. The bees are part of the family, so of course, they need to be kept informed. The logic, in its own strange way, makes perfect sense in your small world. One afternoon, you gather the courage to ask him, "Grandfather, what are you telling them?" He turns, his pale blue eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiles. He doesn't give you a long, philosophical answer. He just says, the bees need to know what their people are doing. They like to be included. He explains it so simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He tells you they are the guardians of the homestead, and they keep watch. If a death occurs in the family, they must be told, gently and with sadness. A black cloth should be draped over their hive. If there's a wedding, they must be invited, and a bit of the wedding cake left for them on a leaf. They share in the family's sorrows and its joys. It's the old way, he says, his voice taking on a serious tone. It's the proper way. You don't ever want the bees to feel like strangers in their own home. This practice, this telling of the bees, is so ancient that its true origins are lost to time. Scholars today debate its roots. Is it a remnant of a pagan belief system, as some folklorists suggest, connecting bees to the soil or as messengers to the gods, or did it evolve from a more practical observation, a way for beekeepers to project their own anxieties and need for order onto the mysterious colony? There is no single answer. The tradition was widespread across Europe, from Ireland to Lithuania, each region with its own slight variations on the ritual. Some insisted you had to hum the news, not speak it. Others believed you had to knock 3 times on the hive before delivering your message. The key detail, the one that remains consistent, is that the bees must be addressed as members of the family. You absorb this knowledge without a second thought. It's as real and as important as remembering to bring the sheep in before a storm or to weed the vegetable patch. It's a rule of world taught to you by the person you trust the most. You watch him that evening as the sun sets and the air cools, and he makes his final rounds. A quiet word for each hive, a gentle goodnight. The hum from the SKEPS seems to answer him, a low, contented drum that promises another day of sweetness and life. You fall asleep that night feeling safe, wrapped in the knowledge that your world is in order, guarded by your grandfather and his thousands of tiny, humming confidence. The change comes without warning. One crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air is sharp in your lungs and the fallen leaves crunch underfoot. Your grandfather doesn't wake up. One moment he is a fixture of your life, as solid and dependable as the heart sign in the center of your home. The next he is gone. The discovery is quiet, a stillness in his room that feels wrong, a lack of his familiar shuffling sounds. Your mother's soft cry is what alerts the rest of the household. Suddenly, The calm, predictable rhythm of your world shatters into 1,000 sharp pieces. The house, usually a place of purposeful bustle, is filled with a heavy, disorienting silence, punctuated by stifled sobs. Your father's face, normally so open and ready with a smile, becomes a mask of stone. Your mother moves as if in a dream, her hands trembling as she performs the necessary tasks. Neighbors begin to arrive, their faces etched with sympathy, their voices low and respectful. They bring small gifts of food, a loaf of bread, a pot of stew, because they know that in a house of grief, the simple act of cooking becomes an impossible chore. You feel unmoored, adrift in a sea of adults, or you don't fully understand. Your grandfather was old, yes, but he was always there. The thought that he would not be there tomorrow was an impossibility, a concept your mind cowed and grasped. Now the impossibility is real, and it leaves a gaping hole in the fabric of your days. Who will tap the doorframe 3 times? Who will know exactly when the apples are perfect for picking? Who will talk to the bees? The day becomes a blur of hushed conversations, of preparations that feel both sacred and terribly mundane. The good black clothes, smelling of dried herbs and disuse, are taken out of the wooden chest. Your grandfather is laid out in the main room, and the vigil begins. The rituals of death take over. They are ancient and deeply ingrained in your community, designed to guide both the departed. The mirrors are covered. The windows are open to let the spirit depart, and a constant, quiet watch is kept over the body. You find yourself hiding in corners, watching the adults move through these prescribed motions. Their grief is a heavy cloak you can't yet wear, but you feel its weight in the air. You wander outside, needing to escape the suffocating quiet of the house. The autumn air is cold, and you wrap your arms around yourself. You walk past the kitchen garden, its plants withered and blackened by the first frost. You walk past the woodpile, stacked high in preparation for a winter that now feels infinitely more daunting. And then you stand before the 5 straw hives. The air around them is still active. A few bees drift in and out of the dark openings, their movement sluggish in the cool air. The familiar hum is still there, though perhaps a little more subdued in the autumn chill. It's the one thing that sounds the same, a tiny pocket of normalcy in a day that is anything but. You look at the hives and think of your grandfather. You can almost see him standing there, his hat in his hands, leaning in to share the news. But the thought is just a ghost, a painful echo. The actual task, the responsibility, doesn't even register in your mind. You are a child, lost in your own quiet sea of confusion and sadness. The thought of what needs to be done, the crucial message that must be delivered, is an adult's job. And every adult is consumed by the human-centric tragedy unfolding inside the house. The passing of a family patriarch in this era was a profound disruption. It wasn't just an emotional loss, it was a practical and economic crisis. The head of the household was the primary manager of the farm, the keeper of specific skills, the main connection to the wider community for trade. His death meant roles had to be immediately reshuffled, plans for the future had to be remade, and the stability of the entire family unit was thrown into question. Historians often focus on these tangible consequences, the transfer of land, the strain on resources. But what gets lost is the disruption to the unseen world, the world of tradition and ritual that, to the people living it, was just as real and just as important. In the overwhelming fog of human grief, the non-human members of the family, the tiny guardians on the edge of the yard, are about to be forgotten. The silence of your family's grief is about to be answered by a much more profound and much more devastating silence. The next 2 days are a continuation of the strange, suspended reality that began when your grandfather died. The household is an activity, but without its usual purpose. Your father is busy dealing with the village elder and the man who tends the churchyard. Your mother, along with aunts and cousins who have traveled from a nearby village, is focused on feeding the stream of visitors who come to pay their respects. The house is full of people, yet it feels emptier than ever before. You are mostly left to yourself, a small, quiet ghost haunting the edges of the adult world. You are told to stay out of the way, to be quiet, to be good. The funeral is planned. It's a simple affair, as is the custom. A procession on foot from your home to the small stone church in the village, and then to the burial ground behind it. The journey is slow, a somber walk down the dirt path your grandfather trod 1,000 times. The whole village seems to turn out, lining the path with their heads bowed. It is a community sharing in the loss. You walk with your family, holding your mother's hand. Her hand is cold. You watch your own feet, scuffing the dusty ground, one step after another. You try to be sad in the way the adults or Solomon dignified, but your grief is a confusing mix of a hollow ache in your chest and a strange, detached curiosity about the proceedings. You hear the final prayers, the sound of the dirt hitting the simple wooden coffin. It's a sound of finality, a door closing forever. And through it all, through the hushed weeping, the formal condolences, and the shared meal back at the house afterwards, no one thinks of the bees. The oversight isn't malicious. It's not an act of deliberate disrespect. It is a simple tragic, and utterly human failure. The collective mind of your family is turned inward, wrapped in its own profound loss. The rituals they are focused on are the human ones: the vigil, the burial, the gathering. These are the pressing, immediate traditions that society demands. The otherworldly etiquette, the quiet conversation with the hives, gets lost in the shuffle. It's a task that belonged solely to your grandfather, and with him gone, the knowledge of its urgency seems to have died with him. His gentle murmurings were seen as his personal quirk, not as a vital piece of the farm's spiritual infrastructure. The academic term for this is a break in cultural transmission. It's what happens when a specific piece of knowledge, often traditional or oral, isn't passed down from one generation to the next. Sometimes it fades over decades, but sometimes it can be severed in an instant, with the loss of a single person, a single library. Historians debate how fragile these folk traditions truly were. Were they so dependent on one practitioner? Or was there usually a community understanding that would catch such a mistake in your case? The answer is painfully clear. The knowledge was held by one man and the family in their sorrow, let it slip through their fingers. You can almost picture the moment the mistake is sealed. The sun is setting on the day of the funeral. The last of the relatives are making their way home. A fragile peace settles over your house, the peace of pure exhaustion. Your father slumps onto a bench by the cold hearth, the mask of strength finally falling from his face. Your mother is quietly clearing away the remnants of the meal. The house is returning to itself, but a version of itself that is forever altered. Outside, in the growing twilight, the 5 straw hives stand silent. There has been no quiet messenger, no soft hum of a voice sharing the sad news. There is no small piece of black cloth, a symbol of mourning, draped over their entrances. To the bees, according to the ancient law, it is as if nothing has happened. Their master, the one who spoke to them, has simply vanished. He has not been given the courtesy of a farewell. The family has kept its most important secret to itself. They have treated the bees not as family but as strangers. An oversight, a simple, devastating oversight. And in the logic of this world, it is more than just a forgotten chore. It is a profound insult, a broken contract. And the consequences for breaking a contract with the little people are about to begin. The silence you've endured for the past few days is nothing compared to the silence that is to come. The day after the funeral, you wake up to a world that feels grey and muffled. The raw shock of the death has passed, leaving behind a dull, heavy ache. The visiting relatives have gone, and the house is quiet again, but it's a hollow quiet, full of empty spaces. You go about the morning chores automatically, your movements slow and listless. You fetch the water, you scatter feed for the kitchen, or into the pale morning light. Something feels off. You stand still for a moment, tilting your head, trying to place the sensation. It's not something you see, but something you don't hear. The hum is gone. The ever-present, gentle, living vibration that has been the soundtrack to your entire life has vanished. The air is empty, silent. It's a silence so deep and so absolute that it feels louder than any noise. It's the kind of quiet that presses in on your ears, making them ring. You walk slowly, cautiously, towards the 5 straw hives, as if approaching a sleeping animal, your ear afraid to wake. The usual flurry of activity around the small entrances is gone. No foragers setting out into the morning chill. The hives are as still and silent as stones. You lean down, putting your ear close to the woven straw of the nearest skep, the one your grandfather always called the Old Queen. You listen, holding your breath. Nothing. You tap the side of it gently, just once. A flicker of movement from inside a single bee crawls sluggishly out of the opening, wobbles on the landing board for a moment, then falls to the ground. It lies there, twitching feebly. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through the fog of your grief. You run back into the house. Father, something's wrong with the bees. Your father, his face still drawn and tired, follows you out. H.E.S. not a beekeeper, H.E.S. a man of the fields, of the plough and the scythe. He understands soil and grain, not the delicate politics of a hive. He stands there, looking at the silent SKEPS, a frown creasing his brow. They're just quiet from the cold, he says, his voice lacking conviction. They'll liven up when the sun is higher. But the sun climbs higher in the sky, and the silence remains. The day warms, but the hives do not. Your mother comes out, her hands wrapped in her apron. She sees the stillness, and a different kind of fear enters her eyes, a fear that is older and more primal than the practical worry of losing a honey crop. It's the fear of a bad omen, of something deeply unnatural. They're in mourning, she whispers, but her voice is full of dread. She knows, deep down, that this isn't the proper mourning of a creature that has been respectfully told of a loss. This is something else. This is the silence of abandonment. This phenomenon, known as colony collapse, is something modern beekeepers fear deeply. Today, we blame it on pesticides, viruses, or habitat loss. But in your time, the explanation isn't scientific, it's spiritual. The bees have withdrawn their favor. They have pulled their life force back into the hive, like a turtle pulling its head into its shell. They are still in there, you can imagine the thousands of them, clinging to the combs in a tight, silent cluster, but their spirit, their connection to your world, has been severed. Historians and entomologists are still trying to understand the full complexities of bee behavior. A hive is a superorganism with a collective intelligence that we are only beginning to grasp. They are incredibly sensitive to their environment, to temperature, to vibrations, to chemical signals. Is it possible that the profound shift in the household's emotional state, the vibrations of grief and chaos, could have been communicated to them in a way we can't measure? Could the absence of the familiar, gentle rumble of your grandfather's voice be a tangible loss to them? The idea is on the fringe of scientific thought, but the folk tradition insists it's true. The bees knew. They knew they had been forgotten. You spend the rest of the day hovering near the hives, a small, helpless sentinel. You watch for any sign of life, any return to the familiar buzz. But there is nothing. The silence stretches, becoming more profound with each passing hour. It feels like a judgment. The hum of home, the sound that meant safety and prosperity, and the rightness of the world, has been extinguished. In its place is a cold, unnerving quiet that seems to foretell a winter far longer and darker than the one on the calendar. The first, most immediate consequence of the unforgivable oversight has arrived. The music of your homestead has stopped. Weeks pass, and the silence from the hives becomes a grim, accepted fact of your daily life. The initial shock gives way to annoying anxiety. Autumn deepens, the day is growing shorter and the nights colder. The harvest is brought in from the fields, a decent, if not spectacular, yield of grains and root vegetables. Your father works from dawn until dusk, his movements heavy with a burden that is more than just physical labor. HES now the sole provider, the only pillar supporting the family. The pressure is immense. One day your mother decides it's time. She needs honey. Not for a sweet treat, but for its practical magic. Your little sister has developed a hacking cough that keeps her, and everyone else, awake at night. The traditional remedy is a spoonful of honey mixed with herbs. It's the first time since your grandfather's passing that anyone has approached the hives with the intention of taking something from them. Your mother goes to the shed and returns with the tools: the smoker, a long, thin knife, and a large ceramic bowl. She is not as skilled or as confident as your grandfather was. Her hands hesitate. You watch from a safe distance as she puffs a few weak streams of smoke towards the entrance of the old queen hive. In the past, this would have produced an immediate, roaring response from within, the sound of thousands of bees becoming agitated and then hopefully calm. The smoke is met with the same profound silence. With a look of grim determination, she uses the knife to carefully pry the woven SKEP from the wooden board it rests on. This is a delicate operation. Your grandfather would do it with a swift, fluid motion, but your mother is slow and clumsy. The seal of propolis, the sticky resin bees use as glue, cracks with a sound like tearing fabric. She lifts the hive, and you both stare into the bowl of shadow beneath. The combs are the bowl of shadow beneath. The combs are there, pale and waxy, a masterpiece of natural architecture. But they are wrong. They are light, almost empty. A normal autumn hive should be heavy, dripping with the dark, thick honey stored for winter. The combs should be capped with a neat layer of white wax, sealing in the golden residue. These combs are uncapped, and the cells are mostly empty. What little honey remains is thin and watery, not the rich, viscous stuff you're used. It's as if the bees, in their silent protest, have been consuming their stores without replenishing them. Your mother reaches in and breaks off a small piece of the comb. It's shockingly light in her hand. A few bees stir listlessly on the surface, but they make no move to defend their home. They are passive, indifferent. She scrapes the meager, watery fluid into her bowl. It's barely a few spoonfuls, not enough to cure a cough, let alone to last the winter or to trade at the market. She places the hive back on its stand, her face pale. The truth is now unavoidable. The bees have not just gone quiet, they have stopped working. The golden flow, the sweet lifeblood of your homestead, has ceased. This is the second stage of the curse, the practical, economic blow that follows the spiritual one. Honey was a cornerstone of your family's small economy. It was your currency for luxury goods. A large pot of honey could be traded for a new iron kettle. A smaller one for salt, a vital preservative for the meat that would need to last you through the winter. Without a surplus of honey, your family is suddenly poorer, more isolated. You are cut off from the small comforts and essential supplies that it provided. The world shrinks a little more. Historians often discuss the concept of the household economy in pre-modern times. Each family unit was a small, self-contained economic engine. Every element, the crops in the field, the cow in the barn, the chickens in the yard, and the bees in the hives, was a vital cog in that machine. The failure of one component put immense stress on all the others. The loss of a honey crop wasn't just a dietary inconvenience. It was a significant financial shock that could have cascading effects on the family's well-being for the entire year. There's also a fascinating, though difficult to prove, theory among some folklore sets that the quality of honey was believed to be tied to the mood of the hive. Good, sweet honey came from happy, contented bees. A bitter or thin honey was a sign of distress or bad luck. Whether there's any scientific basis for this is highly debatable, but for people of the time, the link was obvious. The thin, watery substance in your mother's bowl is sorrow and the bee's displeasure. It is spoiled by grief. Your mother returns to the house with the small, pathetic harvest. She doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. The message is clear. The silence was an omen, and this is the fulfillment of that omen. The bees have withdrawn not just their sound, but their very essence, their gift. The sweetness has gone out of your world, replaced by the bitter taste of a broken tradition. The empty combs are a sign, but the true catastrophe unfolds slowly over the next few weeks, like a terrible, quiet fever breaking. It begins with a single, dark cloud against a pale blue sky. It's a strange time of year for a swarm. Swarming is a spring phenomenon, an act of explosive growth and optimism as a hive splits to create a new colony. An autumn swarm is wrong. It's an act of desperation, of abandonment. You are the first to see it. You're in the yard, splitting kindling when a new sound breaks the oppressive silence. It's not the familiar, low hum of a contented hive. It's a high-pitched, frantic, disorganized buzzing. You look up and see it. A churning, chaotic vortex of thousands of bees is pouring out at the entrance of one of the hives. They aren't flying with purpose, they are flying in a mad, swirling into the air like a plume of dark smoke. It hovers for a moment over the homestead, a swirling tornado of life, and then it moves. It drifts away, over the stone wall, over the bare-limbed trees of the pasture, and disappears towards the dark line of the woods. It does not settle on a nearby branch, as a normal swarm would, waiting to be collected. It simply leaves. You stand frozen, the axe forgotten in your hand. You have just witnessed 1/5 of your family's bees commit mass suicide, or at least, the API and equivalent. They have fled into the wilderness with no queen, no plan, and no hope of surviving the coming winter. Your father sees it too from the field. He comes running, his face a mixture of disbelief and horror. He stands beside you, and you both stare at the hive that is now really empty, a hollow straw shell that will never hum again. They're gone, he says, his voice a hoarse whisper. It's not a question. This is the beginning of the great departure. A few days later, another hive does the same. A frantic, buzzing exodus, a dark cloud against the sky, and then silence. 2 hives down, 3 to go. The process is agonizingly slow. It's not a single, clean disaster. It's a steady, relentless erosion of what was once the heart of your small farm. Every few days, you live in dread, listening for that high-pitched, panicked buzz that signals another departure. The phenomenon of bees absconding, abandoning a hive entirely is different from swarming. Swarming is reproduction, absconding is desertion. Modern beekeepers see it as a colony's last-ditch effort to escape an untenable situation, a pest infestation, a lack of resources, or extreme disturbance. For your family, the cause is clear. You have made the hive untenable. You have made it an unwelcome home. According to the folklore, this is the ultimate punishment for failing to tell the bees. It's not just that they stop producing honey or go quiet. They leave. They take their magic, their life force, their very presence, and they vanish. Folk tales are full of stories of families whose luck ran out the moment their bees left. The belief was that the bees were tied to the genius Loki, the spirit of the place. When they departed, they took the soul of the homestead with them. There's a long-standing debate among historians about how to interpret these kinds of folk beliefs. Are they purely metaphorical stories about the importance of respecting nature, or do they represent a literal belief system where supernatural forces directly intervene in daily life? The truth, most likely, is somewhere in between. For your family, the distinction is meaningless. The bees leaving is the bad luck. It's a tangible loss that feels like a spiritual curse. Each departing swarm is another nail in the coffin of your family's prosperity. You begin to avoid the part of the yard where the hives sit. It's become a place of ghosts, a graveyard. The remaining 3 hives are a constant, painful reminder of the slow-motion disaster. You find yourself watching the sky. Not for rain, but for another dark, churning cloud. It's not a random act of nature. It feels like a deliberate, considered rejection. They are not just leaving their home, they are leaving you. They have found you unworthy, have judged your family and found you lacking. The silence that followed your grandfather's death was unnerving. The lack of honey was a hardship. But watching them leave, actively, unviolently abandoning you, is a profound and terrifying heartbreak. In a small, tight-knit community like yours, there are no secrets. News travels not on the wind, but through observation and quiet conversation. Your family's misfortune is as visible as a plume of smoke from a chimney. The silence of your hives is the first thing your closest neighbors notice. The lack of the familiar hum is a disturbance in the daily soundscape of the area. Then comes the more dramatic evidence, the sight of those frantic, dark clouds of bees flying away, never to return. The talking starts subtly. A shared glance between 2 women at the village well. A lowered voice between 2 men leaning on a fence post. At first, it's couched in sympathy. I shame about the bees at the old farm, they'll say. They've had a run of bad luck since the patriarch passed. But sympathy soon coalesces into something else, suspicion. Your world is governed by a belief in a delicate balance. Luck, good or bad, isn't random, it's earned. It's the result of right action or wrong action, of keeping in harmony with the seen and unseen forces that govern the world. A prosperous farm, with healthy livestock and buzzing hives, is a sign of a family that is living correctly. A failing farm, therefore, is a sign of some transgression. The whispers begin to follow you. When you go to the village for supplies, you feel the weight of eyes on your back. The conversations that stop abruptly when you enter the small shop. The way people are still polite, but with a new, careful distance. You are no longer just the child of a grieving family, you are the child of a family that is under a cloud of bad luck, and bad luck, in your world, is thought to be contagious. Your father feels it most acutely. When he tries to trade for seed for the spring planting, he finds the terms are suddenly less generous. When he asks for help mending a section of collapsed stone wall, the neighbors who would have once readily agreed are now suddenly too busy. No one says why, no one needs to. Your family has become tainted. One evening, you overhear two neighbors talking by the fence line, their voices tearing on the still evening air. 3 hides gone now, one says. They must have done something to offend them. The other one clicks his tongue. They say the boy's father doesn't have the touch. The old man knew the ways, but the son has forgotten them. This is the social consequence of breaking the unwritten law. It's not just a private matter between your family and your bees. It becomes a public stain. In an interdependent community where everyone relies on each other for survival, a family that is seen as unlucky or worse, careless in its spiritual duties, becomes a liability. They have upset the natural order, and who knows what other misfortunes might spill out from their farm to affect the rest of the village. The historical concept of social shaming is crucial here. In a world without a formal police force or constant surveillance, communities enforced social norms through gossip, reputation, and exclusion. Failing to maintain your property, being lazy, or breaking with long-held traditions could lead to being ostracized. This wasn't just about being unpopular, it could have dire consequences for your family's ability to survive, which was just as valuable as any material asset. There is a fascinating and still debated question among sociologists and historians: how much of this bad luck was a self-fulfilling prophecy? Did the bees leave because of a supernatural curse? Or did the community's reaction to the family's initial misfortune, the death of the grandfather, create the conditions for further failure? By withdrawing their support and trust, the community could inadvertently make a struggling family's situation worse, proving that they were indeed unlucky. It's a chicken and egg problem that likely fueled many a village tragedy. For you, the effect is simple and brutal. The world, which was already shrinking, grows smaller still. The warmth of the community you've always known is replaced by a chilling distance. The grief your family carries is now compounded by a new burden: shame. You are marked. The empty hives in your yard are not just a symbol of your family's loss, they have become a public announcement of your failure. And the whispers, like the slow poison of a festering wound, are beginning to infect every aspect of your life. The situation becomes unbearable. The last 2 hives are now silent and empty, the final swarms having departed weeks ago. The 5 straw kept, and like weathered tombstones in the yard, a monument to your family's failure. Your father grows more withdrawn, your mother's eyes are perpetually red-rimmed. The winter is setting in, and the feeling of isolation is as bitter as the cold wind. Desperation forces your mother to do something she has likely never done before. Every village in this era has one. She's not a witch in the sinister sense, not someone who deals in dark curses. She's more of a local repository of knowledge, a keeper of the old ways that are starting to fade even now. She's a herbalist, a midwife, and a folklore sit all in one. She lives on the edge of the village, in a small cottage that smells of dried plants and wood smoke, a place people only visit when modern prayers and practical solutions have failed. Her name is Elspeth. Her face a roadmap of wrinkles. Your mother takes you with her. It feels like a secret, shameful journey. You walk to the cottage at dusk, so as not to be seen. Elspeth opens the door before your mother can even knock, as if she were expecting you. She ushers you in, her dark eyes missing nothing. She looks at your mother's face, then at yours, and nods slowly. "It's the bees, then," she says. It's not a question. Your mother, her voice trembling, tells the whole sorry story. The sudden death of your grandfather, the chaos and grief of the funeral, the oversight, the silence that followed, the empty combs, the slow, agonizing departure of every last beat. She speaks in a low, confessional torrent, as if releasing a poison that has been building up inside her. Elspeth listens patiently, her hands busy twisting dried herbs into a small bundle. She doesn't interrupt. When your mother is finished, a heavy silence fills the small, cluttered room. The only sound is the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Finally, the old woman looks up, and her gaze is not sympathetic, but stern. It is the gaze of a teacher disappointed in a student who has failed the most fundamental lesson. "You broke the law," she says, her voice raspy with age but clear as a bell. "Not the law of the king or the law of the church. You broke an older law, the law of the homestead, the law of the little people." This is the first time you have heard it described with such gravity. Not as a quaint habit, not as a superstition, but as a law. "Your grandfather knew," she continues, her eyes fixed on your mother. "He knew the bees are not livestock. They are not your property to command. They are your partners. They choose to live with you. They guard the luck of the house. They are the thread that ties the family to the land. And you treated them like strangers. You did not give them the respect of a proper mourning." Her words are sharp, but they are not cruel. They are simply the truth laid bare. She rebukes your mother not for her grief, but for her ignorance, for letting the human world completely eclipse the spiritual one. "You held a funeral for the man," Elspeth says, "but you held no funeral for the bee's master. You wrapped your own hearts in the black cloth of sorrow, but you left their homes bare. You whispered your grief to each other in the house, but you did not whisper it to them. Why would they stay in a home where they are made to feel invisible?" The specific phrase Elspeth uses, "the law of the little people," is a fascinating glimpse into the pre-Christian worldview. This term often referred to fairies, sprites, or other nature spirits, but could also include bees, who were seen as existing in a space between the wild world and the human one. Breaking a contract with these beings was considered a grave offense with predictable, dire consequences. While the church was actively trying to stamp out these beliefs, they persisted for centuries in rural communities, forming a parallel system of belief that governed daily life. Scholars today are still trying to map the full extent of this folklore. It was unwritten, passed down orally, and varied from region to region. But the core principles were often the same: respect, reciprocity, and the importance of observing rituals. Elspeth's rebuke is a perfect example of this legal system in action. She is acting as the judge, explaining the law that was broken and the reason for the punishment. She offers no easy solution. There is no magic charm, no special potion that can undo the damage. "You cannot call them back," she says, shaking her head. "They have gone. The luck of this homestead is broken. You have shown the land you are not worthy of its guardians." Her words hang in the air. A final, terrible verdict. There is no appeal. You and your mother walk home in the dark, the weight of the old woman's words a heavier burden than ever. You now have a name for your family's crime. You are lawbreakers. And you have been judged. Back in the suffocating quiet of your own home, Elspeth's words echo in your mind. The law of the little people. It's a key that unlocks a deeper understanding, a more terrifying one, of what has happened. The wise woman didn't just scold you for a forgotten chore, she initiated you into the law. That night, huddled by the weak fire, your mother, humbled and broken by the meeting, begins to tell you more. She dredges up the stories her own grandmother told her. The fragments of belief she had packed away aren't half forgotten in the business of everyday life. You learn that the bees were not just guardians of luck. In the old beliefs, they were something far more profound. They were seen as messengers, travelers between the worlds. Their ability to fly, to disappear into the sky, and to navigate back to their home from miles away was seen as a form of magic. They were believed to have access to a world that humans could not see. They could travel to the other world, the land of spirits, ancestors, and the divine and return. This is why their humming was so sacred. It was the sound of a connection to a different plane of existence. Your mother tells you a story about how, long ago, if a family member was lost on a journey, the family would go to the hive and ask the bees to guide their spirit home. If someone was sick, They would ask the bees to carry their prayers for healing to whatever power was listening. They were a living, breathing line of communication to the great beyond. By telling them the news of the family, she explains, her voice barely a whisper, we were doing more than just being polite. We were updating the great record. We were telling the ancestors. We were telling the spirits of the land. The bees were our couriers. When your grandfather died, we were supposed to tell them so they could carry the news of his passing, so they could help his spirit find its way. The realization dawns on you with a cold, horrifying clarity. In failing to inform the bees, you hadn't just insulted them. You had, according to this belief, failed your grandfather's spirit. You had trapped him between worlds, with no one to announce his arrival on the other side. This elevates the mistake from a simple transgression against nature to a profound spiritual crime against your own kin. The weight of your guilt triples. This belief in bees as psychopompous creatures that guide souls to the afterlife is an incredibly ancient idea with roots that fascinate mythologists. Some scholars trace it back to ancient Greece and Rome, where bees were associated with nymphs and the souls of the dead. Others, particularly in Celtic traditions, see it as a core part of a worldview where the natural and supernatural work completely intertwined. The famous Mabinogion, a collection of Welsh myths, contains hints of this deep connection between bees and the other world. Proving a direct, unbroken line of belief from Celtic druids to a medieval peasant is almost impossible, and historians continue to debate the exact origins and transmission of these ideas. But the core concept that bees held a sacred, liminal role was remarkably persistent in folk tradition. You also learn about the flip side of the coin, the wedding. Your mother recalls how, for her own wedding, her mother had carefully tied a bright ribbon around the hive and left a piece of the bride cake on the landing board. This wasn't just to invite the bees. It was to ask for their blessing, to ensure the new union would be fruitful and prosperous. The bees, as guardians of the homestead's life force, had to approve of any new member joining the family. Their acceptance was crucial for the couple's future luck. Suddenly, all of your grandfather's strange habits snap into focus. They weren't quirks, they were vital rituals. His gentle murmuring wasn't a sign of senility, it was the diligent work of a spiritual diplomat, maintaining the fragile peace between your world and the next. He was the family heir's ambassador to a powerful, hidden kingdom, and you never even knew it. You lie in your straw-stuffed bed that night, staring into the darkness. The house feels different now. The familiar creaks and groans of the old would no longer sound comforting. They sound like the restless stirring of a house whose spiritual guardians have deserted their post. You finally understand the full gravity of the law you have broken. You didn't just forget to feed an animal or mend a fence. You silenced the messengers. You cut the line. And now, your family is adrift, disconnected from the very spiritual landscape you inhabit, with no one to speak on your behalf. Months pass. The winter is as bleak as Elspeth has prophecy foretold. It's a season of meager meals, of shivering by a fire that never seems big enough. The absence of the bees is a constant hollow ache. The 5 empty hives in the snow-covered yard are a daily reminder of your family's disgrace. But then, as the snows begin to melt and the first tentative green shoots appear on the trees, a small, fragile ray of hope arrives. Your older cousin who lives in the next village is getting married. The news comes via a traveling merchant and brings the first ripple of genuine excitement your family has felt in a long time. Our wedding is a powerful event, a celebration of life, continuity, and new beginnings. It's a community-wide affirmation that life goes on, even after loss. For your mother, it represents something more. It's a chance, a desperate, long-shot chance to make amends. We must tell the bees, she says, a feverish light in her eyes. Your father looks at her, his expression weary. What bees, he asks, his voice flat. They are gone. It doesn't matter, she insists. We must perform the ritual. We must show that we remember. We must show we are sorry. It's an act of pure, desperate faith. An apology directed at an empty house in the hope that the departed occupants might somehow be listening. And so the preparations begin with a solemnity that borders on religious fervor. The wedding is still weeks away, but your mother is consumed by the task. On the day of the wedding, your family travels to the next village for the ceremony. It's a joyous affair with music and dancing and more food than you've seen in months. But your mind, and your mother's, is elsewhere. You are given a small parcel containing a piece of the bride cake, rich with honey bought, not harvested and dried fruit, and a long, brightly colored ribbon from the bride's decorations. These are the sacred offerings. You return home as dusk is falling. Your mother takes the ribbon and the cake, and she walks with a determined stride to the graveyard of hives. She doesn't ask for your help. This is her penance. You watch from the kitchen doorway as she approaches the old queen hive, the one that was always the strongest, the one that your grandfather loved most. She stands before the empty, weather desk AEP. Her lips move, but at first, no sound comes out. Then, in a voice that is shaky but clear, she begins to speak. She tells the empty hive the news. She tells it about the wedding, about the bride's beautiful dress, about the groom's proud smile. She speaks of the hope for new life, for children to fill the family with laughter again. Her voice is a plea, a confession, and a promise all in one. We have not forgotten you, she says, her voice cracking. We share our joy with you as we should have shared our sorrow. We invite you to this celebration. Then, with reverent hands, she ties the bright, colorful ribbon around the straw dome. The vibrant silk is a stark, almost painful contrast to the gray, weathered straw. It's a splash of hope on a landscape of despair. Finally, she carefully places the piece of bride cake on the small, silent landing board, an offering to a god who may or may not exist, from a supplicant who has nothing left to lose. This ritual of dressing the hives for a wedding was as important as dressing them for a death. The use of bright colors, ribbons, and small pieces of the wedding feast was documented by folklore sites across England and by folklore into the 19th century. It was a symbolic act of incorporation, making the bees participants in the family's joy. The logic was simple: if the bees shared in the joy, they would bless the union with fertility and prosperity, which, in a very real sense, meant producing more honey and ensuring the family's economic well-being. There's a subtle debate among historians about the primary purpose of such rituals. Was it truly about influencing the bees, or was it a form of social performance for the human community? By publicly observing the tradition, our family demonstrated its piety and adherence to the old ways, reinforcing its good standing among neighbors. In your case, it is a private, desperate act, unseen by any neighbors. It is purely for the bees. Your mother stands there for a long time after the ritual is done, as if waiting for a sign. A returning scout. A faint, ghostly hum. But the air remains still. The silence is unbroken. She has made her apology, extended her invitation. She has followed the law. But the question hangs heavy in the twilight air: is anyone there to receive it? Hope is a fragile and foolish thing. For a few days after the wedding ritual, a tense, expectant energy fills your home. Every time you step outside, you find yourself glancing towards the hives, your breath catching in your throat. You look for any sign, any impossible miracle: a lone bee investigating the cake, a scout bee circling the brightly colored ribbon. You listen for the faintest whisper of a hum on the breeze. There is nothing. The piece of bride cake sits on the landing board untouched. The first day, it's a hopeful offering. The second day, it begins to look pathetic. By the third day, a trail of ants has found it, and they are systematically carrying it away, crumb by crumb. The sight is a small, sharp, brutal metaphor. Your offering has not been refused by the little people. It has been ignored by them, left for lesser creatures to scavenge. The bright ribbon, your beacon of hope, is whipped by the wind. Its colors already starting to fade under the sun and rain. It looks less like a festive decoration and more like a sad, forgotten piece of laundry. The failure is absolute. The gesture of goodwill, the meticulously performed ritual, the desperate apology, it has all amounted to nothing. The universe has not answered. The silence from the hives remains as profound and as final as the silence from your grandfather's grave. Your mother seems to shrink before your eyes. The small spark of hope that had animated her is extinguished, leaving behind a deep, weary resignation. She stops looking toward the hives. She has played her last card, and it has failed. The weight of the family's misfortune settles back in, heavier than before because now it is confirmed. It is not a temporary displeasure that can be appeased. The family's mood plummets. Your father, who had watched your mother's ritual with a kind of weary indulgence, now seems to carry an even deeper anger, the anger of a man trapped in a situation he cannot fight. He can fight weeds, he can fight drought, but he cannot reason with an empty hive. The failure of the wedding ritual is, in some ways, worse than the initial departure of the bees. The departure could be blamed on a single, tragic oversight in a time of grief. This failure feels like a conscious, deliberate, and final rejection. You had knocked on the door, and no one answered. This outcome reflects a harsh truth embedded within many folk traditions. While they offer a sense of control and a way to interact with the unpredictable forces of nature, they do not guarantee success. The spirits, or the little people, were not seen as benevolent, godlike figures who would always forgive. They were often portrayed as capricious, proud, and easily offended. An insult, once given, might never be forgiven. The lore is full of cautionary tales, not of redemption, but of permanent consequences. Stories of people who built their house over a fairy path and were tormented for generations, or fishermen who slighted the sea and never had a good catch again. These weren't stories with happy endings, they were warnings. There's an ongoing academic discussion about the psychological function of such unforgiving folklore. Does it exist to explain persistent, inexplicable misfortune if a family suffers from years of bad harvests? It's easier to blame a single, ancient transgression than to accept the terrifying randomness of blight and bad weather. It provides a narrative, a cause and effect story for suffering, which can be more psychologically manageable than chaos. Whether this is a comfort or just another layer of torment is a matter of debate. For you, it is torment. The hope had made the despair sharper. You learn a new bitter lesson. It's one thing to break a law by accident. It's another thing to beg for forgiveness and be met with a stony, indifferent silence. It confirms your family's status as outcasts. The path back to harmony is closed. The offering has been refused. The ribbon flutters on the empty hive, a mocking reminder of a joy that was not shared, a plea that was not shared, a plea that was not heard. The silence is no longer just an absence of sound. It is an answer, and the answer is no. The failure of the wedding ritual marks a turning point. It's the moment your family, and especially you, stops looking for a way back and starts truly seeing the world you now inhabit, a world governed by a web of invisible rules and subtle powers. Your eyes are open to the quiet magic, and the quiet terror that underpins everything. It's like learning a new language and realizing people have been speaking it around you your whole life. You start to notice the other, smaller laws that people obey without thinking. You see your neighbor pour the first few drops from his jug of ale onto the earth before he drinks, a silent offering to the ground. You see the blacksmith spit into the fire for luck before starting a difficult piece of work. You watch a woman, on her way to the market, turn back home because a single magpie crossed her path, a well-known man of sorrow. Before, these were just things people did. You see them for what they are: negotiations. Tiny, everyday rituals designed to appease unseen forces and maintain a fragile peace. Your world, which once felt so simple and solid, now seems filled with hidden tripwires. You learn that it's bad luck to bring a sprig of hawthorn into the house, that you should never hand a knife directly to a friend but place it on the table for them to pick up, and that you must always greet a kid you meet on the road. Each of these rules, you realize, is a scar left by a forgotten story, a warning passed down through generations. Breaking them might not result in a catastrophe as dramatic as yours, but it chips away at your luck bit by bit. You become a student of this hidden world. You listen more intently to the old folks' chatter, picking up fragments of lore. They talk of Puck, a mischievous spirit who braids horses' manes and sours the milk. They speak of the importance of leaving a bowl of cream on the doorstep on certain nights. You begin to understand that your family's crime wasn't a singular, isolated event. You were simply living in profound ignorance of a complex legal system that governs the entire relationship between humanity and the wild, magical world. This concept of a folkloric landscape is something that greatly interests cultural geographers and historians. They argue that for people in pre-modern times, the physical landscape was also a spiritual one. A particular hill wasn't just a hill, it was the home of a powerful spirit. A strange, twisted tree wasn't just water, it was a place of power. A well wasn't just a source of water, it was a gateway to the underworld. Navigating this landscape required a completely different set of skills from just knowing the path. It required knowing the stories, the names, and the rules associated with each place. A fascinating and highly debated fringe theory suggests that some of these beliefs might be folk memories of much older realities. For instance, could the prohibitions against certain areas be a passed-down memory of a place with dangerous natural gases or a contaminated water source? Could the rituals to appease spirits be a garbled memory of tributes paid to a neighboring, more powerful tribe? It's impossible to prove. But it adds another layer of intrigue to the world you are now discovering. This new awareness is a heavy burden. It's the difference between walking through a field in blissful ignorance and knowing it's a minefield. You feel a constant, low-level anxiety. Did you remember to thank the fire for its warmth? Did you accidentally step on a patch of clover that was sacred to someone? Or something? The simple act of walking from your home to the village is now fraught with potential transgressions. Your family's dramatic, large-scale failure has made you hypersensitive to the small ones. You are an exile, and like all exiles, you are obsessed with the rules of the kingdom you've been banished from. The world has not changed, but your perception of it has been fundamentally and irrevocably altered. You see the invisible threads that hold the world together, and you know with a certainty that chills you to the bone that your family has torn a hole right through the center of the tapestry. Spring turns into a summer that is hot, dry, and unforgiving. The crops in the field are stunted, the vegetable garden withers. The bad luck, once confined to the area around the hives, seems to have spread like a blight to every corner of your family's land. The other villagers, seeing your brown fields, next to their own green ones, keep their distance even more. Their suspicions confirmed. Your farm is not just unlucky, it is diseased. And then comes the day you have been dreading, though you didn't know how to name the dread. It's a quiet, unremarkable afternoon. You are sitting on the doorstep, trying to mend a worn-out leather strap, when a flash of movement catches your eye. It comes from the last of the 5 hives, the one that has been silent the longest. You look up, and your heart plummets. A single bee crawls out of the dark entrance. It is the first one you have seen in months. It is not a healthy bee. It is slow. It drags itself onto the small landing board, its movements weak and trembling. It stumbles forward, its legs splayed, and then, with a final, feeble twitch, it tumbles off the edge and falls to the dusty ground below. It lies still. It is the last one. You don't know how you know this, but you do. It's a certainty that settles in your gut, cold and hard as a river stone. This wasn't a scout. This was the last survivor of a city of ghosts, a solitary watchman who has finally succumbed. The hive is now not just silent and empty of life, it is empty of death too. The final spark has been extinguished. You get up and walk slowly towards the hive. You kneel in the dirt and look at the tiny, still body. It's so small, so insignificant. A speck of black and yellow fur in the vast, indifferent dust. Yet it feels like the fall of a kingdom. This is the period at the end of the sentence. The final, undeniable conclusion to the story of your family and their bees. You stand up and look at the 5 straw skeps. They are no longer a graveyard. They are just objects. Hollow, meaningless things. Woven straw and wood, bleached by the sun. The spirit that once inhabited them, the collective soul of the colony, is long gone. The last physical remnant of that life has now departed. The connection is severed completely. This moment, the death of the last bee, holds a powerful symbolic weight in some folk traditions. It represents the final departure of the soul or luck of a place. There's a particular strain of folklore, especially in the British Isles, that personifies the hive as a single entity, often referring to it as the master or the collective bee. The death of the last bee wasn't just the end of the colony, it was the death of this entity. There is, of course, a more scientific explanation. A queenless, dwindling colony will slowly die off. The bees that remained after the others absconded were likely older, at the end of their natural lifespans, unable to reproduce. Their slow, one-by-one death over the winter and spring is a predictable biological process. But to you in this world, biology is just the mechanism through which the deeper, spiritual truth expresses itself. The scientific why doesn't matter. The symbolic what is everything. An interesting question that historians of emotion debate is how people in the past processed this kind of layered grief. You are not just mourning the loss of a food source, a source of income, a family tradition, a spiritual connection, and your social standing. You are grieving for your grandfather all over again, because this is the final, tangible result of his absence. It's a complex, compound grief that a single, tiny body has come to represent. You don't call for your parents. There is nothing to say. There is no new disaster to announce, only the confirmation of the old one. This isn't a dramatic event, it's a quiet, profound full stop. You stand there for a long time, looking at the dead bee, and then at the 5 silent hives. The land feels barren in a way it never has before. The hum of home is a distant memory. The whispers of the village are a present reality. The hope of amends is a foolish dream. The homestead is now truly unprotected, and you know with a chilling certainty that you cannot stay here. Your family has lost its place in this land. The bond has been broken, and it cannot be rewoven. The death of the last bee is not a cause, but a catalyst. It's the final piece of evidence in a long and painful trial. The verdict was already in. Your family can no longer survive here. The farm is failing, the community has turned its back, and the land itself seems to have rejected you. The whispers of bad luck have become a deafening roar in your father's ears. The decision, when it comes, is therefore not a surprise. It feels like an inevitability, the only possible move left on the board. Your father announces it one evening, his voice heavy with the weight of the words, "We are leaving." He doesn't just mean leaving the farm. He means leaving the village, leaving the entire old world behind. He speaks of a place across the great ocean America, a place where a man is not defined by his ancestors, where the land has no memory of old curses, and where a family can build a new life from scratch. It's a desperate, terrifying, and exhilarating idea. The decision throws the household into a flurry of a new kind of activity, not the hushed, sorrowful activity of a funeral, but the frantic, focused energy of a departure. Your life is dismantled, piece by piece. Possessions are sorted into 2 piles, those that can be carried, and those that must be left behind. The pile of things to be left behind is heartbreakingly large. The heavy oak chest your grandfather built, the sturdy iron cookpot that has simmered 1,000 meals. Each abandoned object is a memory you are forced to sever. You are selling the farm, but you are not really selling it. You are abandoning it for whatever meager price you can get. The buyer, a shrewd neighbor, knows you are desperate. He offers a pittance, and your father, his face grim, accepts. You are not just losing your home, you are being robbed of its value, a final insult from the community that has ostracized you. This choice to leave for the American colonies was the ultimate gamble for countless European families in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Historians point to the primary drivers: economic hardship, religious persecution, political unrest. But underneath these large, formal categories lie millions of smaller, personal stories like yours. Families driven out, not by a king's decree, but by a blighted crop, a social dispute, or a persistent run of what they could only call bad luck. America was not just a land of opportunity, it was a land of forgetting. A place to escape a past that had become unbearable. The debate continues among historians about how much of the old world folklore and superstition truly made the journey across the Atlantic. Did immigrants consciously shed these beliefs as part of their reinvention? Or did they pack them in their mental luggage along with their few material possessions? The evidence suggests it was a mixture of both. While the new, rational spirit of America encouraged shedding silly superstitions, the core anxieties about luck, fate, and the supernatural found new forms and attached themselves to the new landscape. As you pack your small bundle of belongings, a change of clothes, a A small wooden carving your grandfather made for you. A sharpened knife you feel a confusing mix of terror and relief. You are leaving behind everything you have ever known. The curve of the hill behind your house. The smell of the damp earth. The faces of the people in the village. Even those who now shun you. It is all you have. The thought of the vast unknown ocean is terrifying. But you are also leaving behind the whispers. You are leaving behind the 5 silent hives that stand as monuments to your shame. You are leaving behind the palpable weight of the curse. The idea of a place where no one knows your story, where your family is not the unlucky ones, feels like a gasp of fresh air after being held underwater. The last day arrives. You take one final walk around the homestead. You see the initials you carved into the barn door as a child. You touch the cold stone of the well, and you stand, for the last time, before the 5 empty hives. The garish wedding ribbon has long since blown away. They are just decaying straw, waiting to be kicked over or burned by the new owner. You feel a pang of sadness, but it is a distant sadness now, a story that happened to someone else. You are turning the page. You are making the desperate Atlantic gamble, betting everything you have left on the hope that a change of scenery is enough to change your fate. The journey to the coast is a blur of muddy roads and unfamiliar faces. You are packed into a wagon with a few other families, all of you bound together by the same quiet desperation. The world you knew, the small walkable circle of your home, village, and pasture expands with dizzying speed. Every mile puts more distance between you and the source of your shame. The seaport is a shock to the system. It's a chaotic, noisy, stinking bedlam, bigger and more crowded than anything you could have possibly imagined. The sheer number of people, the towering masts of the ships, the foreign smells of salt, tar, and coal smoke, it's an assault on the senses. Your family, accustomed to the quiet rhythms of the countryside, huddles together, overwhelmed and insignificant in the heaving crowd. The ship itself is a wooden monster, groaning and creaking as if it's alive. You are herded down into the 'tween decks, a dark, cramped, foul-smelling space that will be your home for the next 2 months. There is no privacy, no fresh air, and the constant rocking of the vessel is a torment that makes your stomach churn. You are wedged between dozens of other families, a human cargo packed as tightly as any barrel of salted fish. The days at sea merge into one long, miserable ordeal. The food is vile, salty, hard biscuit and questionable water. The darkness is broken only by a few swaying lanterns. The air is thick with the smells of sickness, fear, and unwashed bodies. Storms toss the ship like a child's toy. The roar of the wind and waves a terrifying symphony. In those moments huddled in the dark, you are certain you will die, that the ocean will be your grave. But it's during the rare moments of calm, when you are allowed on deck for a brief gasp of fresh air, that you have time to think. You stand at the railing gripping the salt sticky wood and stare out at the endless, empty expanse of grey water. There is nothing but sea and sky. The old world is gone, a memory behind you. The new world is an unseen promise ahead. You are suspended between 2 lives. It is here, in this liminal space, that you reflect on the lesson of the bees, the memory of the hum, the sting of Elspeth's rebuke. It all comes back to you, not with the sharp pain of fresh grief, but with the clarity of distance. You understand now, in a way you couldn't before, the magnitude of what was lost. It wasn't just about honey. It was about respect for a world larger and more mysterious than your own small human concerns. You make a silent vow, a salt-stained promise to yourself, and to the ghosts of the bees you left behind. If you survive this journey, if you are given a second chance in a new land, you will not forget. You will honor the old ways. You will honor the old ways. You will carry the knowledge that your grandfather tried to pass on. The world may be changing, people may be talking of science and reason, but you have seen what happens when the ancient contracts are broken. You will not make that mistake again. This internal journey of the immigrant is a theme historians of migration are deeply interested in. The physical crossing of the Atlantic was also a psychological one. It was a period of intense reflection, trauma, and transformation. People were forced to confront their past and decide what parts of their identity they would carry forward. For many, this meant reinforcing their core beliefs as a source of stability in a chaotic world. The promise you make is a classic example of this clinging to a piece of the old identity as an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The question of whether these beliefs were a superstitious burden or a vital coping mechanism is a central debate. From a modern, rationalist perspective, your promise to talk to insects might seem like clinging to the very irrationality that led to your family's ruin. But from a psychological perspective, it's a way of reasserting control. You have identified the source of your past failure and are creating a plan to prevent it in the future. It's a way of making sense of suffering and giving yourself a sense of agency. The voyage continues, a seemingly endless purgatory. People get sick. Some die and are committed to the deep in a brief, grim ceremony. But your family endures. You huddle together for warmth, share your meager rations, and whisper stories of the home you left and the home you hope to find. And in your heart, the salt-stained promise solidifies. You are the keeper of the memory now. You are the one who will remember to tell the bees. After an eternity of grey water and grey skies, the first sight of land is a smudge of green on the horizon. A collective gasp, then a ragged cheer rises from the decks. The promise is real. You have survived. You have arrived in the new world. Landing is another chaotic whirl, but this time it's laced with a desperate, fragile hope. The air smells of pine and damp earth, wilder and fresher than the tired, cultivated smells of the old world. Your family stands on solid ground, blinking in the bright, unfamiliar sunlight, your legs still swaying with the memory of the sea. You are weak, gaunt, and you are nothing but the clothes on your back and the small bundles in your hands. But you are here. You are alive. The first year is brutally hard. You are indentured servants, working to pay off the cost of your passage. The work is back-breaking, clearing land that is thick with ancient trees and tangled undergrowth. The winters are colder, the summers hotter than you were used to. You face new dangers, unfamiliar animals, new diseases, and the constant, gnawing uncertainty of survival. But slowly, painstakingly, your family carves out a new existence. You complete your term of service. You acquire a small plot of land of your own, a piece of the wilderness that you can call home. It's not the gentle, rolling pasture of your old life, it's a rugged, raw piece of earth on the edge of a vast, dark forest. You build a simple cabin, a rough but solid shelter. You clear a field and plant your first crop. It feels like the first day of creation. And one of the very first things your father does, once the essential work of building a shelter is complete, is to build a new home for the bees. He doesn't make the old-fashioned straw SKEPS. Here in the land of abundant timber, he builds simple wooden boxes, what will one day be called Langstroth hives, though the design is still roughened and standardized. It takes him weeks, working in the evenings by firelight after a long day of clearing fields. He is not a natural beekeeper, but he works with a focused determination. He is not just building a box, he is rebuilding a broken part of your family as soul. Getting the bees is a challenge. You can't just go out and catch a wild swarm. The honeybees you know are not native to the Americas, they were brought over by earlier colonists, precious cargo on the same ships you traveled on. They are a valuable commodity. Your father trades a significant portion of his first meager harvest for a single, small colony ANUC, or nucleus hive from a more established farmer. The day the bees arrive is a momentous occasion. It's a small, buzzing cluster of life in a wooden box, carried carefully for miles. Your father places the new hive in a spot he has chosen with great care, sheltered from the wind, facing the morning sun, near the small patch of wildflowers you've allowed to grow by the cabin. You all stand back and watch as he opens it. The bees emerge, first tentatively, then with growing confidence. They circle, orienting themselves to their new home, their new sun, their new world. And for the first time in years you hear it, the sound you thought you'd never hear again, a low, gentle, purposeful hum. It's the sound of home. It's the sound of a second chance. It's the sound of a promise being kept. This historical detail that honeybees are not native to North America is a fascinating footnote to the story of colonization. They were imported by English, Dutch, and other European settlers in the early 17th century. Native Americans called them the white man's fly, as their arrival in a new territory often heralded the arrival of European settlers. For the colonists, they were a vital source of sweetness and wax, but they were also a piece of the old world, a familiar comfort in a strange and often hostile environment. The effort your father puts into acquiring them speaks to their immense practical and symbolic value. There is a long-standing, though likely apocryphal, story that some Puritan communities had laws on the books regarding the proper care and treatment of bees, echoing the old folk traditions. While concrete evidence for such laws is scarce, the very existence of these stories suggests how deeply the idea of a special human-bee relationship was embedded in the culture of the settlers. The question for historians is always how to separate official policy from widespread folk practice. You look at your father's face as he watches the bees. The hard, bitter lines etched by years of misfortune seem to soften. A small, genuine smile touches his lips. This isn't just about honey anymore. This single, small hive is a declaration. It's a statement that your family will not live in fear. You will live in harmony. You have brought the best part of the old ways to the new land. You have planted a new seed of hope, and it hums with the promise of a sweeter future. Life in the new land continues its slow, arduous, but steady rhythm. The single hive survives its first winter, a major victory. The following spring, it thrives, growing strong in the abundant wilderness. The hum becomes a more confident, established presence beside your cabin. It's a sound of reassurance, a sign that the new beginning is taking root. And then comes the first great test. The first major family event in this new world. Your mother gives birth to a son, your new brother. The birth is a long and difficult affair, attended by an able woman who serves as the local midwife. But the result is a healthy, squalling baby, a symbol of the family's own rebirth. He is a child of this new soil, a native of this wild land. His arrival brings a wave of profound joy and relief, washing away some of the lingering shadows of the past. The day after the birth, before the celebrations truly begin, your father takes you aside. His face is serious, his eyes filled with a solemn purpose you recognize immediately. "It is time," he says simply. He doesn't have to explain. You know what he means. This is the moment you have been preparing for, the moment your salt-stained promise on the high seas was all about. This is the first formal test of your family's renewed vow. You follow him out to the hive. The air is cool and sweet with the smell of pine and blooming wildflowers. The hum from the wooden box is strong and steady. Your father doesn't carry a smoker or any tools. He approaches the hive with the same reverence your grandfather once did, his hat in his hands. You stand a respectful distance behind him, a silent witness and apprentice. He leans in close to the hive entrance, and in a low, clear voice meant for the bees and for you he speaks. "Hear me, little people," he begins, using the old formal address. "We have news. There is a new soul among us. A son has been born to this house. His name is Samuel. He is of our blood, and now he is of your family too. We share our joy with you and ask for your blessing upon him. May he be strong and healthy, and may he always know your friendship." His voice is steady, without a hint of the awkwardness he once had. He is no longer just a man of the fields. He has fully embraced the role of spiritual diplomat that his father once held. He is speaking the ancient language of respect, performing the ritual not as a desperate, superstitious act, but as a fundamental and necessary duty of a householder. After he finishes speaking, he stands in silence for a moment, his head bowed. A few bees crawl around the entrance, seemingly undisturbed. There is no dramatic sign, no sudden change, but none is expected. The ritual is not about receiving a sign, it's about giving the information. It is the fulfillment of a sacred obligation. Watching your father, you feel a profound sense of continuity, of a broken chain being reforged. The knowledge that died with your grandfather has been reborn in your father, and it is now being passed to you. You are no longer just the child who witnessed a disaster, you are the inheritor of the tradition, the next link in the chain. The practice of telling the bees was surprisingly resilient in colonial America, especially in more isolated rural communities in New England and Appalachia. Numerous diaries, letters, and later folkloric collections from the 18th and 19th centuries mention the custom. It was often noted as a quaint, old-fashioned habit by more enlightened observers, but for the practitioners, it remained a serious business. The core elements formally announcing births, deaths, and marriages remained remarkably consistent with the European traditions. There's a fascinating debate among historians about the gendered nature of this task. In many accounts from the Old World, it was the woman of the house, the mistress, who was responsible for telling the bees. In others, like in your grandfather's case, it was the male head of the household. In the American context, it often seems to have been the primary beekeeper, regardless of gender. The key was not who did it, but that it was done correctly. As you and your father walk back to the cabin, a quiet understanding passes between you. You have done the right thing. You have honored the law. You have treated the bees as family, sharing your most precious news with them first, even before some of the human neighbors knew. The small humming box by the woods is no longer just a source of honey. It is the spiritual heart of your new home, a living testament to a hard-won lesson. The cycle of life has turned, and this time, you have turned with it, in harmony. The future of your family and of your little brother Samuel feels a little more secure, watched over by 1,000 tiny, winged guardians. Your family's fortunes begin to turn. The land, once so stubborn and wild, starts to grow tall. The cabin is expanded, and your little brother Samuel grows from a squalling baby into a sturdy toddler. And the bees flourish. The single hive swarms the next spring, and your father, now more confident in his skills, carefully captures the swarm and houses it in a new box. One hive becomes 2, then 3. Prosperous hum that was once a ghost in your memory is now the living, breathing soundtrack to your new life. Your homestead becomes known for its honey. In a land where sugar is a rare and expensive luxury, your family's rich, dark honey, flavored by 1,000 different wildflowers from the vast forest, is a prized commodity. It's a source of income, of course, but it's also a source of pride, and your neighbors notice. Life in the colony is a mixture of fierce independence and absolute interdependence. Families live far apart, separated by tracts of wilderness, but they rely on each other. When a neighbor's farm flourishes, it is a subject of intense interest and analysis. Your family, who arrived with nothing and seemed destined for failure, is now thriving. And your apiary is the most visible symbol of that success. The questions start innocently. A neighbor, leaning on the fence after helping your father with the barn raising, gestures to the neat row of humming hives. You have a good hand with them, he says, a note of admiration in his voice. Mine absconded last winter. Can't seem to keep them. This is the opening. And your father, instead of just talking about practical beekeeping, about ventilation or mite control, hesitates for a moment, and then decides to share the other, more important, part of the secret. You have to keep them informed, your father says, his voice low and serious. They're part of the family. You have to tell them the news. The neighbor looks at him, his expression a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Talking to insects, it sounds like an old-world superstition, the kind of thing they were all supposed to have left behind. But he can't argue with the results. He sees your healthy hives. He has tasted your honey. Your family's success is undeniable. And so your father tells him the basics. How to announce a death in the family with a quiet voice and a black cloth. How to share the news of a birth or a wedding with joy. He explains it not as a magical spell, but as a matter of respect, the same way you do respect a good neighbor. This is how the strange gospel spreads. The neighbor, desperate after losing his own bees, decides to try it. He feels foolish, whispering to a wooden box. But the next colony he acquires stays. It thrives. He tells his brother-in-law, who tells another friend. The tradition begins to ripple outwards from your farm, a seed of old-world ruled law planted in the fertile ground of new-world desperation. The transmission of folklore is a fascinating process for anthropologists. It's rarely a formal, top-down instruction. It spreads organically, through personal contact, observation, and storytelling. It often takes root most effectively when it's attached to a practical, observable outcome. The idea of telling the bees might have been dismissed as nonsense, if it weren't for the very real, very costly problem of colonies failing. Your family becomes proof of concept. There's an ongoing academic debate about the significance of folk beliefs in colonial America. How did traditions from different parts of Europe, England, Germany, Scotland merge and adapt in the melting pot of the colonies? A German immigrants. B law might have subtle differences from an English ones. As neighbors shared their traditions, these small variations would blend, creating a uniquely American version of the old superstition. The gospel spreading from your farm is a micro-example of this complex cultural process. Not everyone is a convert. Some of the more educated and enlightened settlers in the nearby towns scoff at the idea. They talk of science of rational a priori management. They see it as a sign of backward peasant thinking. But in the small, isolated homesteads, where life is a constant gamble against the wilderness, people are willing to try anything that might tip the odds in their favor. The proof is in the prosperous hum that now emanates from several farms in your small corner of the world. You have become an unlikely missionary. You, who once bore the shame of a broken tradition, are now the keeper and spreader of that tradition. You have not just rebuilt your family's luck, you have begun to reweave the fabric of spiritual respect into the community around you. One whispered conversation, one thriving beehive at a time. Time in the new land moves differently. The years are marked by the steady growth of your farm and your family. You are no longer a child haunted by a spiritual crime, but a young adult, strong and capable, a product of this rugged wilderness. Your little brother, Samuel, is now a boy, full of questions and a boundless energy that you find Besant's reassuring presence. The tradition of telling the bees is an ingrained, unquestioned part of your family's life. But beyond your small self-contained world of fields and forests, another world is stirring. A world of ideas. News travels slowly to your isolated homestead, but it arrives nonetheless, carried by merchants, in letters from the coast, in pamphlets passed from hand to hand. It's the news of a new age, the age of enlightenment. The talk is of reason, of science, of the rights of man. People are questioning the old authorities, the kings, the churches, the unquestioned traditions of the past. In the coffee houses of Boston and Philadelphia, men are debating logic and natural law. They are looking at the world not as a place of magic and spirits, but as a complex machine, a clockwork universe created by a rational God, a puzzle that can be understood and mastered through observation and intellect. This shadow of a new age falls gently at first on your world. It comes in the form of an almanac, full of astronomical charts and scientific advice for farming, which your father now consults alongside his own inherited knowledge. It comes in the form of a traveling preacher who speaks less of damnation and spirits, and more of man's reason as a divine gift. The conflict is subtle, a quiet tension between the old world and the new. Can one believe in both the predictable movements of the planets as described in an almanac, and in the necessity of whispering a death to a beehive for your father's generation? The answer is yes. They live in both worlds at once, holding the new science and the old traditions in a delicate, unexamined balance. But you can feel the ground shifting. The world of invisible rules and spiritual contracts that you learned with such terror as a child is beginning to be seen not as a hidden reality, but as a collection of quaint, harmless superstitions. The fear is draining away, replaced by a kind of nostalgic affection. The lore of the little people is slowly becoming folklore. The tension between the Enlightenment and folk belief is a central theme for historians of this period. The 18th century was a battleground of ideas. While intellectuals and the urban elite were eagerly embracing rationalism, the vast majority of people, especially in rural areas, continued to live in a world shaped by older beliefs. This wasn't a simple case of science good, superstition bad. These belief systems often coexisted, sometimes blending in surprising ways. Some early scientific farming manuals would still include advice rooted in astrological or folk traditions, without any sense of contradiction. A fascinating, though still debated, area of this history is the role of printing. Did the spread of printed materials like almanacs and newspapers accelerate the death of oral folk traditions by promoting a standardized, rational worldview, or did it sometimes help preserve them? With early folklore sites printing collections of old stories and customs, even as they framed them as relics of a dying past, the answer is complex. Print was both a destroyer and a preserver. You feel this change most acutely when you try to explain the tradition to someone younger, or to someone more influenced by the new thinking from the towns. You see a flicker of polite indulgence in their eyes, the same look you might give a child who seriously explains the rules of a make-believe game. They don't see it as a law. They see it as a charming story. The urgency is fading. The terror you felt when the last bee died on your old farm is becoming impossible to explain. It's a feeling that belongs to a different time, a different world. The shadow of the new age is long, and it brings with it a cold, clear light that threatens to burn away the mysteries. The world is becoming a safer, more predictable, and perhaps a less magical place. And you, a bridge between the old and the new, are left to wonder if something precious is being lost in the exchange. The clearest sign of the changing world comes not from a pamphlet or a preacher, but from within your own home. It comes from your brother Samuel. Born and raised in the new world, Samuel is a different creature from you or your parents. He learns to read and write with an ease that seems miraculous. He devours every book and paper that makes its way to your remote homestead. His mind is sharp, curious, and shaped by the new language of reason and skepticism. He grows into a young man who is practical, hard-working, and deeply loving of his family, but he has no memory of the old country, no visceral understanding of the curse that drove you here. To him, the story of the silent hives is just that, a story, a dramatic tale of hardship from the hazy, distant past. The clash comes one summer afternoon. Your father, now graying and moving with the careful slowness of age, is preparing to go to the hives. A neighbor in a homestead 2 valleys over has passed away, and the news has just reached you. As is his solemn duty, your father is going to inform the bees. Samuel, who is mending a harness nearby, watches him with an expression of fond exasperation. "Father," he says, his tone gentle but laced with the unmistakable confidence of youth. "You don't really believe that makes a difference, do you?" Your father stops, turning to look at his son. "It is the proper way," he says, his voice quiet but firm. "It's a lovely story," Samuel continues, choosing his words carefully. "But that's all it is. They're insects. They're insects. They respond to smoke and seasons, not to news." He gestures with the harness. "Their honey is sweet because the clover is plentiful this year, not because they are happy with us. That's science. The other is superstition." The word hangs in the air between them, superstition. To Samuel, it's a neutral, descriptive term. To your father, and to you, it's an insult. It's a dismissal of the most profound and painful lesson of your lives. You see the hurt in your father's eyes. He doesn't know how to argue with his son. He cannot debate the logic of science. His knowledge is of a different kind, a knowledge of the soul, of tradition, of a broken contract and its devastating consequences. He can't prove it with facts and figures. He can only point to the thriving hives and say, "This is what worked." "You did not see what we saw," your father says finally, his voice heavy with memory. He then turns and walks towards the hives, his duty clear, leaving Samuel, shaking his head with a small, sad smile. This generational conflict is a classic feature of periods of great social and intellectual change. The younger generation, educated in a new paradigm, often views the beliefs of their elders as outdated and irrational. Historians call this paradigm shift. Samuel is not being disrespectful, he is simply operating from a completely different understanding of cause and effect. He sees the world as a system of material forces, while your father sees it as a system of spiritual relationships. There's an ongoing debate in the history of science about how sticky old beliefs are. Do they vanish completely in the face of new evidence, or do they go underground, persisting as private beliefs even when publicly denied often? People can hold to contradictory ideas at once. Samuel might publicly espouse a scientific worldview, but would he, in a moment of crisis, find himself whispering a prayer or avoiding walking under a ladder? The line between rational belief and ingrained cultural habit is often blurry. You are caught in the middle. You understand Samuel's logic. You've read some of the same books. You can see the world through his clear, rational eyes. But you also have the memories. You can still feel the terrifying silence of the old farm. You remember the cold dread of watching the last bee fall. Your knowledge isn't theoretical, it's written in the scar tissue of your childhood. You go over to Samuel and say he does it because he promised he would. He does it because he remembers. Samuel looks at you, his skepticism softening into understanding. He's a good son. He loves his father. He may not share the belief, but he can respect the conviction behind it. The argument ends, not with one side winning, but with a quiet, unresolved truce. But the crack is there. The tradition, which was once a sacred law for the entire family, is now just your father's personal practice. The chain of transmission, which was so carefully ray-forged, is showing its first signs of breaking again. The years continue their relentless quiet march. Your parents grow old, their bodies stooped and their hands gnarled from a lifetime of hard labor. They pass away, one after the other, and are buried in the small plot of earth behind the farmhouse in the soil they tamed. And each time you perform the ritual. You, not Samuel. You are the one who walks to the hives, your heart heavy with a genuine, personal grief this time, and you whisper the news. The master is gone. You drape the small black cloth over the entrance. Samuel stands beside you, his head bowed in respect for you and your ritual, if not for the belief itself. He loves you, and he honors your need to do this. But the practice is yours alone now. The torch has been passed to you, and you know, with a quiet certainty, that you will be the last one to carry it. Your brother marries a sensible woman from a nearby town, and they have children of their own. Your nieces and nephews are children of an even newer world. They grow up in a young country that is forging its own identity, a nation built on commerce, invention, and a fierce belief in progress. They learn about steam engines and cotton gins in their school books. The idea of whispering family secrets to a beehive is not just a superstition to them, it's a fairy tale, as remote and whimsical as a story about a talking fox or a magical beanstalk. You become the keeper of the fading flame. You are the family eccentric, the beloved aunt or uncle with the strange, gentle habit. Your nieces and nephews watch with fond amusement as you make your regular pilgrimages to the hives. They see you go out after the first big snow of winter to clear the entrances, murmuring to the bees inside. They watch you tie a small, colorful ribbon to a hive when one of them gets married. They accept it as part of who you are, a charming relic of a bygone era. They do not feel its weight. They do not understand its history. The farm prospers under Samuel's practical, scientific management. He rotates the crops according to the advice in the latest agricultural journals. He breeds his livestock for better yields. And he manages the bees with a modern eye, weaning them when necessary and splitting the hives to prevent swarming. The bees thrive under his care, a fact he sometimes gently points out to you. See, his smile seems to say, it's about good management, not magic. And you don't argue with him. How can you? The world has proven him right. Science works. The seasons turn, the bees make honey, and the great, terrifying world of spirits and broken contracts seems to have retreated, fading like mist in the morning sun. This transition from a widespread communal belief to a private, personal ritual is a key stage in the folklorization process. It's how powerful, living traditions die. They don't vanish overnight, may lose their communal authority and become individual habits. They lose their truthful and become customs. Historians often trace this process through personal diaries and letters, noting how writer in one generation will describe a folk practice as a necessary fact of life, while their grandchild will describe the exact same practice as a quaint custom my grandmother had. There's a continuing debate about what is lost when this happens. Is it merely the shedding of irrational fears, a necessary step in human progress, or is it the loss of a language for expressing a deep connection to and respect for the natural world? Your position embodies this debate. You live in a world that is safer, more prosperous, and more predictable than the one you were born into. But you also feel a quiet sense of loss, a thinning of the world's texture. The magic is gone. You continue your rituals not because you expect the world to end if you stop. You do it because it is your promise. It is your connection to your grandfather, to your parents, to the terrified child who crossed an ocean. It is an act of memory. You are a living monument to a forgotten law. You are the last priest of a dying religion, tending a sacred flame that no one else can see. And you know that when you are gone, the flame will finally go out. You are old now. Your hair is white, your movements are slow, and your days are spent mostly in a comfortable chair by the window, watching the seasons turn. The farm is in the capable hands of Samuel's children. The world outside has transformed in ways that still boggle your mind. The railroad has arrived, bringing news and goods from cities you will never see. There is talk of telegraphs, of messages that can fly across wires faster than a bird. Isolated colony you arrived in is now a bustling, confident state in a growing nation. One day your grandnephew, a young man with a passion for reading the newspapers that now arrive daily on the train, sits with you. He is reading a story that has come all the way from England, news from across the ocean you crossed a lifetime ago. "Isn't this a queer thing?" he says, looking up from his paper. "It says here that Queen Victoria has died." He pauses, and then his eyes light up with a particular kind of discovery. "And it says the royal beekeeper was formerly tasked with going to all the hives in Windsor under Buckingham Palace to inform the bees of her death. They even had to drape each hive in black bunting." He shakes his head, a smile of bemused affection on his face. "Grandad," he says, turning to you, "they do it too, just like you." You look at him and a slow, deep satisfaction settles in your heart. It's a feeling you haven't had in a long, long time. For decades, your practice has been seen as a personal, familial quirk, a rustic superstition that survived only in the backwoods of your own memory. You had come to believe that you were the last one, the final, lonely keeper of a forgotten way. But here is the proof, printed in black and white, coming from the very heart of the most powerful empire in the world. This wasn't just a peasant's habit. It wasn't just the fearful superstition of an illiterate farmer. It was a law that reached all the way to the throne. The Queen's bees, the most official and doggest bees in the world, had to be told, just like your grandfathers were supposed to be. The ritual you have so faithfully maintained is not just a family secret, it's a remnant of a deep, ancient, and surprisingly universal human instinct. The historical account of the bees being informed of a royal death is one of the most famous and well-documented instances of this tradition. It was widely reported in newspapers when King George VI died in 1952, and more recently, with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II in 2022, the royal beekeeper, John Chappell, confirmed that he had carried out the ritual, explaining it was a tradition he felt duty-bound to uphold. This continuity is astonishing to folklorists and historians. It demonstrates how a practice can lose its original superstitious fear but survive for centuries as a mark of respect and a cherished tradition. The debate among historians here is fascinating. Why does a tradition like this survive in such a high-profile, modern context? Is it simply a quaint piece of ceremonial theatre, a nod to the magic of monarchy, or does it tap into something deeper, a persistent, perhaps subconscious, belief that there are certain protocols that must be observed, certain threads of connection between the human world and the natural world that are best not broken? The fact that it continues, even in the 21st century, suggests its power goes beyond mere superstition. Your grandnephew sees it as a charming, funny coincidence. But for you, it is a profound validation. It's a message from the past, from the old world you left behind. It tells you that your family's tragedy wasn't a unique failure, but a fall from a grace that even kings and queens were expected to uphold. It tells you that your lifelong adherence to the promise was not a silly eccentricity, but a participation in an ancient, noble, and widespread rite. You look out the window at the row of beehives, they're weathered and grey. Samuel's son tends them now with his scientific charts and modern methods. He doesn't whisper to them, but he is a good keeper. The hum is still there. You close your eyes and you can almost feel the connection, a thin, shimmering thread stretching back through the years, back across the ocean, connecting your small, American farm to the grand palaces of a queen. The law was real. The validation from the Queen's beekeeper is a quiet, final gift. It doesn't change the world, but it changes how you use it within it. The weight of being the last one lifts, replaced by a sense of being part of a long, invisible chain. In the final years of your life, you become a storyteller. Your grandnieces and nephews, now with children of their own, gather around your chair, and they ask for the old stories, and you tell them. You tell them about the small farm in the old country, a place that now exists only in your memory. You tell them about their great-great-grandfather, a man with gentle hands who murmured secrets to his bees. You tell them the story of the tragedy, of the unforgivable oversight, of the silence that fell upon the land. You speak of the slow departure, the creeping bad luck, and the wise woman's stern rebuke. But now, when you tell the story, the tone is different. It's no longer a terrifying cautionary tale of a spiritual crime. It has softened with time. It has become folklore. You are witnessing and participating in the final stage of the tradition's life cycle. It has gone from sacred lore your grandfather's generation, to a broken and feared rule your childhood, to a renewed and solemn vow your father's generation, to a personal, eccentric habit your generation, and now to a story for the children. Its power to command belief has vanished, but its power to enchant, to teach, and to explain a family's identity remains. Your grandnephew's children listen with wide eyes. They live in a world of steam and steel, a world that is rapidly being mapped, measured, and explained. Your stories are a window into a different reality, a world that feels more mysterious and, in some ways, more alive. They ask you questions that Samuel's generation never would have. Were the bees angry? Could you understand what they hummed? They are trying to grasp the logic of a world that operated on a different axis. The academic study of folklore, which began in earnest in the 19th century with figures like the Brothers Grimm, was born out of this exact moment. As industrialization and modernism swept across Europe, scholars rushed to collect these old stories, songs, and customs, believing they were preserving the last remnants of a dying peasant culture. They saw these tales not as literal truths, but as cultural artifacts, windows into the psychology and history of a nation. The stories you are telling are precisely the kind of oral tradition these early folklore sites would have treasured. There's a persistent debate about this process of salvage folklore. Did collecting and writing down these stories preserve them, or did it kill them by removing them from their living, breathing context and pinning them like butterflies in a display case? By turning a sacred law into a tale, does one strip it of its soul? It's a question without an easy answer. The tradition is dead as a practice, but it has achieved a new kind of immortality as a story. You don't think in such grand terms. You are simply passing on the memory. You are explaining to these bright-eyed children of the new century why their family came to this land, what hardships they faced, and what strange, powerful beliefs guided them. You are giving them their history. The story of telling the bees has become your family's founding myth. You look at their faces rapt with attention, and you realize the tradition hasn't entirely died. It has transformed. The original fear is gone. The ritual obligation is gone. But the central lesson remains embedded in the story. The world is a mysterious place, and it is wise to move through it with respect. The law has faded, but its echo remains, a quiet hum in the heart of your family's narrative, a story to be told on long winter nights, a charming piece of folklore that explains who you are. And so the old storyteller's voice fades, leaving you in the quiet of your own time. The story is over, but it settles within you, a soft, resonant hum, like a string that has been plucked and is still vibrating. The world of curses and forgotten laws feels 1,000,000 miles away a lifetime ago. And yet, maybe it's closer than you think. Picture this. It's a sunny afternoon, your own time, in your own garden. The scent of cut grass is in the air. In the distance, a lawnmower buzzes, and in a quiet corner, near a patch of lavender, sits a neat stack of white wooden boxes, a modern beehive. You pull on your own ritual garments, not a homespun tunic, but a white canvas suit, a zippered veil, and thick leather gloves. You are a modern beekeeper, an amateur scientist, a student of entomology. You light your smoker, not with a smoldering rag, but with clean pine needles, puffing a cool, white smoke. You are armed with reason, with knowledge gleaned from books and online forums. You know about varroa mites, about nectar flows, about the precise chemical language of the queen's pheromone. You approach the hive, your movements slow and deliberate, not out of fear of a curse, but out of a practical understanding of bee behavior. You are here to inspect the colony, to check their health, to ensure they have enough space. It is a rational, scientific process. And yet, as you reach for the lid of the hive, you hear a voice. It's your own. "Hey girls," you murmur, your voice a low, soft tremble. "Just coming in to see how we're doing today. Don't mind me." You don't even think about it. The words come out on their own, an unconscious and automatic greeting. You lift the lid and the warm, sweet smell of 100,000 wings vibrating in unison fills the air. You go about your work, checking the frames, looking for the queen, speaking to them all the while. Look at all that capped brood. You've been busy. Oh, that's a beautiful frame of honey. Why do you do this? You don't expect them to answer. You don't believe they understand your words. And yet, it feels fundamentally wrong to be silent, to treat them as mere objects, as a biological machine. It feels rude. It feels like an intrusion. The quiet murmur is an act of respect, a way of announcing your peaceful intentions, of making yourself less of a threat and more of a partner. This is the lingering ghost of the old law. Focus and cultural anthropologists would argue that your instinct to talk to your bees is a cultural remnant, a faint echo of the very tradition our story followed. The explicit belief in the curse is gone, but the behavior it enforced approaching the hive with a calm voice and respectful demeanor remains, because it feels right. But here is where the academics are still debating. Animal behaviorists and acoustic biologists might offer a different, more scientific explanation. They might suggest that the low-frequency vibrations of a calm human voice can actually mask the bee's own high-frequency alarm signals. Your murmuring may have a tangible calming effect on the hive, reducing their defensive response and making your inspection safer and less disruptive. It's possible that our ancestors, through thousands of years of trial and painful error, discovered a fundamental biological principle without understanding the science behind it. They simply knew that speaking gently to the bees worked, and so they wrapped this practical knowledge in the sacred, unforgettable packaging of a spiritual law to ensure it was passed down through generations. Perhaps the two theories are not mutually exclusive. Perhaps the old law was born from a deep, intuitive observation of what works, an observation that science is only now beginning to explain. You close up the hive, your inspection complete. You give the wooden box a final gentle pat. All right, girls, I'll leave you to it. The hum continues, steady and strong. The mystery remains. Is your quiet conversation a quaint, modern habit, or are you, without even knowing it, still practicing a faint, ghostly piece of an ancient, forgotten law you still, in your own small way, telling the bees? And so our long journey through time comes to its quiet end. The voices from the story are fading now, drifting away like smoke on the evening air. The image of the 5 straw hives in the old country, the creak of the ship on the vast ocean, the sight of the first humming box in a new, and let them all soften at the edges. Let them dissolve like sugar in warm water, becoming less of a story you were told, and more of a dream you are now gently leaving behind. All that matters now is the quiet of your own room, the steady, gentle hum we started with so long ago. Perhaps it is a small fan, turning and turning, or just the deep, settled silence of the night. Feel the slow, easy rhythm of your own breathing. A gentle tide pulling in and drifting out. Feel the weight of the blankets, a comforting pressure that holds you safe. The hum of the story is gone, replaced by the hum of your own deep rest, the sound of thoughts growing slow and heavy. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to think about. The story is over, let it go. There is only the soft darkness now, a warm and welcoming sea. And the path is clear into your own dreams, into your own quiet, peaceful night. The end of the article. Good night.